Good evening. Can you hear me? Welcome to St. Thomas More. Can you raise your hand if you are visiting our parish this evening? Wonderful, wonderful. Yes. You are very welcome here. Just a practical note, restrooms and water fountains are just out the back door to the left. My name is Andy Otto. I'm the Director of Adult Faith Formation here at STM. And as a Jesuit parish, our charism calls us to find God in all things and to seek justice in our world. We believe deeply that faith and justice are inseparable, and that following Christ means actively working for the dignity and flourishing of every person, especially those on the margins. That's why we regularly offer events and programs that bring these values to life. And tonight's gathering is an expression of that commitment. It's my great honor to introduce our guest this evening, Father Greg Boyle. Greg is a Jesuit priest and the founder of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and re-entry program in the world. For over 3 decades, he's lived out a radical vision, treating gang members not as problems to be solved, but as beloved children of God, deserving compassion, opportunity, and kinship. His ministry began in the late 1980s as pastor of Dolores Mission Church in Boyle Heights, the poorest Catholic parish in Los Angeles, and the neighborhood with the highest concentration of gang activity in the city. During what became known as the Decade of Death, when gang violence claimed 1,000 lives in a single year, Father Greg and his community chose a different path, not of incarceration and suppression, but of accompaniment and tenderness. From these humble beginnings, Homeboy Industries has become a beacon of hope, employing and training thousands of former gang members and offering critical services to anyone seeking a better life. Father Greg's work has earned him the California Peace Prize, induction into the California Hall of Fame, and the University of Notre Dame's Laetare Medal, and most recently, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor. He's also a gifted writer whose books have touched millions. You may know his New York Times bestseller, Tattoos on the Heart, or his subsequent works, Barking to the Choir and The Whole Language. His most recent book, Cherished Belonging, The Healing Power of Love in Divided Times, published just this past year, offers a timely and hope-filled vision of how love can bridge our deepest divisions. Before we have him up here, we'd like to welcome Ronald Dennison.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. You hear me? All right. How about now? All right, we're good to go. Like the gentleman said, my name is Ronald. I'm 35 years old. I was born and raised South Central Los Angeles in California. Growing up in the mid-90s, everything around me was dark. When I say dark, there wasn't no hope. No hope in my home, not in my community, not even in my school. Growing up, I was a middle child. It was 9 of us, not including my cousins that was taken in by my auntie as well. But it was 9 of us. So it was a hard time for me reaching the level of love that I wanted, the level of acceptance. I wanted to be heard amongst all my brothers and sisters. I had a problem with that, and that led to identity issues. It led to a lot of anxiety. Growing up, seeing my mom trying to do well, even though she had addiction herself. It wasn't just gang banging. She was a gang member herself, but my mom was addicted to crack as well for my whole life, until she had my baby brother. But growing up, being that middle child, being in the middle of it, trying to get that love, it was hard. I turned to the streets. I turned to everything that I was seeing around me. Gang banging became my lifestyle, day in, day out. I ended up starting gang banging at 12 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to get dapped up like my big brothers going to the liquor stores. I wanted to get loved and embraced by the older homies that was on the block with these nice cars, these chains and these clothes and stuff like that. So I started getting into the behaviors. End up selling drugs for most part of my teen years. I was in and out of juvenile hall. My first time going to jail, I was 12 years old. I was in the car with my big brothers and his homies. I was in the car with him, didn't know I was supposed to run. We get pulled over. So me being 12 years old, I sat in the back of that car. Everybody that was in that car with me left me. To the point, it was so crazy, even the police laughed at me. At that time, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to interpret what was happening. I went to jail for like 4 days. At 12 years old, even though I cried all 4 of them days, I cried as soon as they took me, as soon as they booked me. But some odd reason, as soon as I got out, I wore it as a badge of honor. I went to school telling all my homies, my friends, this is what happened in there, this is what I did, this was up. And that became a cycle. It was a slap on the wrist. It didn't do nothing, it didn't teach me no lesson being in there. Sadly to say, it became a cycle. And ever since that incident, I never been able to stay out of jail more than 3 months since 12 years old. I'm 35 now. I done been to juvenile detention centers, camp. I done been part of foster care as well, and ended up in prison when I was 19 years old. I ended up in prison for a gang crime. A gang crime that was committed when I was 19 years old. I wasn't fully equipped mentally to even understand the damages I was causing, not only to myself, but to my victim's family. I wasn't understanding the fact that, hey, I go to court tomorrow and I could do triple life. I was 18 years old facing triple life. Didn't know how to live inside of prison, didn't want to live in prison. How could you tell somebody to wake up every day and live and continue to live when you're facing 3 life sentences, your cellie half life, and everybody around you don't have no hope? Well, I started programming like I had life in there. Even though my mom convinced me she took to take a deal. I took a plea deal for 15 years. At that time, 15 years was forever. But to my mom, she's like, you're young. You're going to get a second chance at life. You're going to be able to restart. At that time, she didn't understand. I go in here, I might not make it back out. Even though I was making it back out, all these little slaps on the wrist, but now I'm going to the penitentiary. First time in the penitentiary, it changed my life drastically. I ended up taking that deal and still couldn't conceptualize the fact that, hey, I'm about to spend 15 years of my life. How much I'm gonna lose, how much I'm gonna miss out. I just started living on a day-to-day basis, and I started living amongst my environment. I started getting good at being in prison, being around, trying to earn respect, still indulging these bad habits that got me in prison. Unfortunately, when I went to jail, I continued to make bad decisions. I ended up spending more time than I was supposed to. All that changed. And when I say change, it didn't change for the good. It changed for the bad. Approximately 7 years into my prison term, I ended up losing my mom. Even though she was fighting her struggles, her battles, she still found a way to be there for me. Even though I was adding to her death, not knowing at the time. Yes, she gave me store, made sure I got letters, cards in the mail. And this whole time she supported me. It was 7 years into my sentence. I didn't miss store, got a package every 3 months. But what I failed to realize that I was adding to these burdens to her death. I thought my mom was healthy. I thought she was gonna be there when I got out. That was my reason for taking the 15 years. When I lost her, I couldn't deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. I ain't gonna say I can't. I didn't know how to deal with it. My emotional intelligence was all over the place. I couldn't even be myself. So what you do? You do something that you used to. And I committed another act of violence while in prison, and that ended up getting me 2.5 years in solitary confinement. And I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose because I didn't want to be around nobody. I couldn't stand to be around nobody at that time. I didn't even know how to be around myself. Sitting in that cell 24 hours a day, that was the darkest time of my life. But as I stand in front of y'all today, it was my most reflective time as well. Gave me time to face the man in the mirror, accept accountability, things I've been dodging for a long time. I used to pride myself on respect and these things in this gang culture, hold myself to high expectations. At the end of the day, I was just a fraud. I was pretending to be this character that I built up over the years through this gang activity, through this violence. I had to let all that go. When I say let it go, I had to look at life differently, look at myself differently. I started talking to myself differently in that 2 years in a hole. You in there by yourself. I had to face the man in the mirror. And I made a promise. I made a promise not only to myself, but to my moms and to my higher power. At the time, I didn't have a relationship with God. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't going to therapy. But I knew it was a higher power somewhere out there. All the bullets I didn't dodge, all the licenses I could have had for the things I've done. That's one thing I started taking in consideration on a day-to-day basis. And I started changing within that cell, within myself. I always knew I could be bigger than what I've been doing. I always felt it. Every crime I done committed, every bad decision that I made, I always had a gut instinct. I would either suppressed it, looked the other way. It was even been instances where I couldn't stomach certain situations. But why? I want to be loved. I want to be heard. I want to be seen by this community, by these people that, hey, y'all my family, right? Well, they wasn't my family. They wasn't. Even though I'm grateful for the things that I've been through, the decisions that I made, but I had to come to the realization I was dedicating myself to this game in the wrong ways, in the total wrong ways. And I didn't want to feel like I was turning my back on my community as well, because yes, gangs are bad, very bad. But like myself, I know there's good people within them gangs. It's good people that's trying to make it out, that probably need some resources, probably need a helping hand, probably need a foundation. Well, I wanted to be that for not myself, but for my younger homies, for people that I used to influence, people I used to manipulate on the yard, things like that. I started with my education. In prison, fortunately, I was able to get my high school diploma with help through the juvenile system, being in and out of the system. They make sure you go to school. You got to go to school in there. So I got a lot of credits, yes. But I always loved school when I was younger, knew I was good at it, knew I was smart, but was distracted. But once I lost my mom, I dedicated myself back to my education. I ended up getting my associate's degree in social work. Why? Because I want to do what I'm doing now, inspiring others, inspiring my younger homies. And I started that in prison on the same yard that I used to commit these bad acts, influence these bad people. I said, disregard the politics. All these racial barriers, all these racial thick lines that's drawn in prison, I stopped feeding into it. Once I started going to school and being in classrooms where the teacher talked to you as if you were human, understand you as you're human, that changed my life. And it happened in that cell in school, and I dedicated myself to my education. It took me a long time to get my degree because of lockdowns and stuff like that, but I pushed through it. I showed my younger homies that, hey, this is something that you could do. You could transition to be a better self, better version of yourself, and that's what I did. Got out of prison early due to the fact that I was able to get my degree, and I was released September 6th, 2024, and that was my mom's birthday. Thank you. I'm here now, and that's what got me at Homeboys Industries. That's why I'm standing in front of y'all today, and that's just a little bit about myself. Thank y'all for having me, and have a blessed night. Thank you.
thank you all very much for being here. Thank you, Ronald, for accompanying me. We've been up early. And thank you for your hospitality to all the Jesuits. I'm wearing everything I own because it's cold. Anyway, can you guys hear back there and everything? Okay. Does that mean no? Okay. I guess I was here 10 years ago, which I don't remember. I knew I was here, but the church feels different or something. Say it again. There was the retreat, but I think I've done 2 retreats. I don't remember coming here either. There must be another church. Yeah, and remember there was like a tornado or something? And I was about to go on and the whole thing went black. All the lights were out. And then somebody said, "We're gathering at my house, come on." And we all went to somebody's house and, we're eating potato salad and just talking. It was glorious. I remember that. Anyway, so especially in this day and age, like YouTube is the bane of my existence. Everybody's heard me before, so that happens. And I remember one summer I had spoken at this foster grandparent gathering in Orange County in California. And it went okay, and it was one summer. Well, the next summer, they invited me back to speak to the same group. And I thought, why are they inviting me to the same group? But, oh, well, I say yes because I'm allergic to no or something. But so I gave the talk, and after the talk, there was this foster grandmother came up to me, and I think she liked the talk, and she had big tears in her eyes. And she grabbed both my hands and she said, "I heard you last year. It never gets better." So kind of hoping she misspoke there, but anyway, so we're inching ourselves close to Martin Luther King commemoration, and what he says about church could be said of our particular gathering tonight. It's not the place you come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to imagine something different. You go from here to imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. You go from here to dismantle the barriers that exclude. And you go from here, as we are compelled to do, excuse me, to stand at the margins, because that's the only way they'll ever get erased, is if we stand out at them. And we stand with the particularity. We stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. We stand with those whose dignity has been denied and whose burdens are more than they can bear. We go from here, and what a privilege to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, to be able to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And this is what the marrow of the gospel is about. It's about where you stand. And we brace ourselves as we go to the margins because people will accuse you of wasting your time there. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And so you go from here, and because of you, other voices will get heard. Well, I think none of the above makes any damn sense unless we're anchored in a God who's really quite spacious and generous and expansive. We've settled for a God that's quite partial, and that gets us into trouble. St. Ignatius of Loyola talks about the God who's always greater. And that's because if you're pigeonholing God and you're trying to say this is who God is, Ignatius wisely says, no, we have this God who's always greater than however we try to conceptualize it, but we're human, so we try to have notions about God. There's nothing more consequential to our actual living than of the notion of God that we have. So we settle for the partial God rather than hold out for the God we actually have. And that's an important adult task. My friend Mirabai Starr, who's a mystic and a translator of mystics, and I invite you to read her because she's wonderful. And she always says, once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods, which is a good description, again, of what adults do. Because we're famous for projecting onto God who we would want to be if we were God. Because it's true that we're created in the image and likeness of God, but it's also true that the image of God, our image of God, creates us. And so we're kind of stuck there unless it's an ample image. Anne Lamott says, you know you've created God in your own image when God hates the same people you do. So you want to try to avoid that if you can, you know. Meister Eckhart, who I recommend, who's a mystic and a theologian, would say, it's a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. Well, that's important to know, although we don't really believe it fully. We kind of, maybe occasionally. No, that's sort of the essence. And that's important to be anchored in that essence. I had a spiritual director many years ago who said, you know, we need a better God than the one we have. He was a Jesuit, but of course he was right, you know, because we don't want to settle. We want to hold out for something really quite magnificent. So for 40 years, I've walked with gang members, and it's the privilege of my life to have done so. And the day won't ever come where I am more noble or I have more dignity or I'm closer to God than people like Ronald Dennison. And part of what for the last 40 years, I do on a regular basis is I say Mass in all these detention facilities. We have a lot of them. We were sharing earlier about how many, you know, which ones it was easier to say which ones you hadn't been in. But so I went to all of them. And a lot of them are getting shut down now, which is probably a good thing. But that was a regular feature during the hard years. And recently I was at San Fernando Juvenile Hall, but said Mass. And years ago, we would have Mass in a big old gym, and there'd be 300 gang members there. And, so I had my Alban and my stole, and, I was sitting kind of in my chair, and it was a little raised thing, and then there was the podium, and they had these sheets in English and in Spanish, and so you could read whatever language you're comfortable with. And so I was sitting there, and the homies were getting up and doing the readings, and so I closed my eyes, and I just rested this sheet on my lap, and I didn't read along. I thought, well, I'm going to hear them proclaim the word. First guy got up and did reading from the Hebrew Bible. Second guy got up to do the responsorial psalm, but I don't know, there was like an overabundance of confidence in his voice, and he gets up and he says, "The Lord is exhausted." And I look at the sheet, I say, what the hell? And it was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. Because when push comes to shove, the exalted God is really a projection of what we would hope for if we were in charge. But the exhausted God, everybody in this church can connect to it, Because somebody can talk to you on a Monday and say, "How was your weekend?" "Oh my God, I'm pooped. We had the grandkids over," and oh Lord. But it's a good tired. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a good tired. But it's a tired and an exhaustion that has only to do with love and generosity and choosing to become the generosity of God in the world. And that's just so essential. And so we need new images to kind of help us find our way. Since COVID, I guess, I don't think it happened before, at least for me. We kind of invented Zoom. And I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers, and they're all married and kids. And so we would, because we lived all over the place, we would get on the Zoom, the last Sunday of every month at 4 o'clock. And so we were doing it recently, and it was my mother's birthday, or near my mother's birthday, and she would have turned 100 years old. But she died like 8 years ago, and she was 92. My father had died maybe 30 years before that. But she died the way you want to die, in your own bed, in your own home, surrounded by your kids. And she was sharp as a tack even till the very end. In fact, that last year of her life, she was watching so much MSNBC, she was becoming Rachel Maddow. And she wasn't a lick afraid of dying. That was the thing that was so startling about her. Like, a month or so before she died, she was just giddy. She was exhilarated. She said, "I've never done this before," which is something you say exactly before skydiving, And in fact, the day before she died, I was sitting at the foot of her bed, and there was nobody around, which was very rare. There was always 9 people in the room at any given time, and so I'm sitting there, and she's asleep, and she opens her eyes, and she sees me sitting at the foot of the bed, and she says, "Oh, for crying out loud," and she goes back to sleep. Well, she's pissed that she's not dead. Sorry. Well, then the next day, as luck would have it, and again it was so odd and rare, at exactly noon, my sisters had gone out to get lunch or something. It was just the two of us, my mom and myself, and I was sitting there, and she had her eyes closed. At exactly noon, she lifted her head from the pillow. She opened her eyes. She let out this wondrous, glorious gasp. Skydiving. And she left us. And no one in earshot of that sound could ever be afraid of death again. And I remember towards the end of her life, there'd be 3 or 4 or all 8 of her kids and a bunch of grandkids around her bed. And she'd be in and out of consciousness, but when she was in, she would focus on just one of us with a laser beam focus. And she'd just look at this one person, and she'd say with breathless delight, "You're here. You're here." And after we buried her, I thought, I think that may well be the singular agenda of our exhausted God, which in fact is to look at you with breathless delight and say, "You're here. You're here." And that's it. We muddy it up all the time. I think of, like Lent will be upon us, and we have the 40 days and 40 nights of Jesus in the desert, and which is the precursor for our Lent. And I can't say the word Lent without telling you about Michelle Nunez, who was a homegirl who worked at Homeboy. Once she came into my office and she said, "Well, it's official. I just found out my man's been cheating on me." I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry to hear that." "Oh, I don't sweat it. I just went to church, got me them ashes, gave his ass up for Lent." That story has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But I can't say the word Lent and not tell you about her. But here's the notion we have about Jesus. He's desert, maybe dark night of the soul, doubt, growling stomach. When I suspect it was mainly God looking at God's own kid and saying with breathless delight, "You're here. You're here." And so we receive the tender glance from God, and then we choose to become that tender glance in the world. We notice the notice of God, and then we choose to be that notice in the world. It enables us to notice people who go unnoticed. It's how it works. It's what God hopes for. So Homeboy was started a long time ago, as was mentioned in the kind introduction. When I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission, and it was nestled in the middle of 2 public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, it was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other. And the LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city. I buried my first young person killed because of the sadness in 1988. And about 3 months ago, I buried my 263rd. Not all from that parish, of course, but I know a lot of gang members. I get asked. So we started things. First thing we did was we started a school because there were so many junior high, middle school age gang members who had gotten the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the projects in the middle of the day. They were writing on walls, they were selling drugs, they were violent. So I would go out to them and I would kind of isolate them one at a time. I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And each one, every single one, said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so I kind of forced my hand a little. So right across the street from the church is our parochial school, Dolores Mission, which occupied the first 2 floors of a 3-story concrete building, grades K to 8, first 2 floors. But the entire 3rd floor was the convent where the sisters lived. And I sat them down one evening in their living room, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out? And we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And they looked at each other and they went, sure. And literally that was the extent of their entire discernment process. And we were off and running. And that brought a lot of gang members to our church property, which was something of a disconnect, Parishioners would sidle up to me and say, hey, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out, And so it was posed a good gospel challenge. And, but they came, it's funny, teachers didn't last long. We had fights every single day. I'd have to run across the street to try to put down these fights. I had a principal who lasted exactly 1 day. And I called him the next morning, I go to find out where the hell he was, and he had changed his phone number. And apparently he had checked into a witness protection program. But the kids came every single day. And then in no time they said, if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women in the parish, and the profile in the housing projects, generally speaking, are women with children. You don't have a lot of men. And myself and the women, we marched around the factories surrounding the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. So we had no choice. We started things. We started a maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of members of the rival 8 gangs in the projects. And then the very last day of April of 1992, the 4 police officers were acquitted who had beat down Rodney King. And every pocket of poverty ignited in Los Angeles, except the poorest pocket, my parish. And so a reporter came snooping around, wanted to know why that was the case. And I said, well, I'm not entirely sure, but we have had 60 strategically hired rival gang members who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before. And, more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch their own community. So a day later, the article appeared. Well, the following day, I was summoned to the Beverly Hills office of a movie producer named Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million. And his first question to me was, how should I spend my money? And as I look back on it now, I can see that I woefully undershot my request. I was young, I had hair. So I said, there's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. You could buy it. It has ovens, they don't work, but you could fix them. I don't know, we could put hairnets on rival gang members and they could bake bread and we could call it Homeboy Bakery. And he said, sure. And so again, we were off and running. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had plural, we changed our name. We had called ourselves Jobs for a Future. And we changed it to Homeboy Industries. And nobody ever intends to do such a thing. But you know, we backed our way, we evolved our way, now in our fourth headquarters, into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors wanting to reimagine their lives. Every single one who walks through the doors comes barricaded behind a wall of shame and disgrace, and the only thing that can scale that wall is tenderness. Every man and woman who finds their way to us comes with what psychologists would call a disorganized attachment. Mom was either frightened or frightening. And you can't calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. And so anyone who walks through that door freely, which is what we hope will happen, some gang member will greet them at the door, and their whole being will say, "You're here. You're here." And so we try to create a place that's safe, where people can be seen, and then they can be cherished. If it's true that the traumatized are likely to cause trauma, then it has to be equally true that the cherished will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. You know, homies, especially lifers, will come in and say, we're used to being watched, but we're not used to being seen. And if you can understand in your gut the qualitative difference in those two things, then you go, okay, that's what that is. And so we have an 18-month training program. Training is kind of a misnomer. It's really about healing. We have free tattoo removal Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But nobody's forced to do it. If you want to do it, fine. We have therapy. We have all sorts of curricular things. We have 14 social enterprises, bakery, restaurants, dog grooming. What else do we have? Electronic recycling, all sorts of things. And men and women, black, brown, all rivals. Everybody has to work with multiple enemies. And Homeboy is sort of the front porch of the house everybody wants to live in. But all of us are called to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. Unfortunately for us, there are only 4 things: inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. And if you take those 4 things seriously, you can know that you're taking seriously the things that Jesus did. parentheses. So, I'm a Jesuit, like the folks here, like, Pope Francis. I'm just saying. And the homies don't really know what a Jesuit is, if I'm honest with you. We always have about 3 who work there, including novices and those kinds of things. And so my office is a glass enclosed thing, and so I can look out and I can see the reception area. I can see who's walking through the door today, and I like the vantage point of it. And we have like 8 tour groups a day. Ronald gives a lot of these tours, and groups large and small from all over the world. And I was at my desk behind my desk, and 2 homies were in the front, and all of a sudden a group of like 20 tour group plants itself right in front of my office. And it's a tour, and I wave faintly, and it's one of those observe our founder in his natural habitat. So, and the tour guide, I don't know if you remember him, but his name was Osvaldo, and the homies would say he has a loud ass voice, and so he's standing there with this group of 20, and he says, "This is Father Greg Boyle. He is the founder of Homeboy Industries. He is a jiu-jitsu priest." So I couldn't help myself. From my desk, I was doing some of my best moves, Well, anyway, I told you that to tell you this. On February 28th, 1540, St. Ignatius of Loyola enters this word for the first time in his diary or spiritual journal. And he proceeds to use the word quite a bit for the remainder 12 years of his life. And before he dies, he goes back and he circles the word for almost as many times as he's used it. And I speak Spanish, but I'd never heard this word before. And the word is acatamiento, and it comes from a kind of, I think, an archaic word, acatar, which means to look at something with attention. And it gets translated as affectionate awe. And of course, it's born of a personal relationship between the God of love and St. Ignatius. But I'd like to think that Ignatius wanted to break it open and have it be more expansive for the world at large. Like, what if acatamiento is about our stance at the margins? How are we to stand there? What is our disposition to be? Acatamiento, affectionate awe. Which reminds me, in the Acts of the Apostles, it has this one line that says, "And awe came upon everyone." And it suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So, many years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia. And it was what we used to call in those days a gang in-service. And social workers would commandeer a hotel ballroom, and they'd sign in and get credits. And from 9 to 5 on this very one day, they would hear keynotes and workshops and breakout sessions, all trying to understand why are kids joining gangs. And I did a lot of these over my lifetime, and you want to talk about how no kid is seeking anything when he joins the gang. He's always fleeing something. I've never found an exception. And gangs are the places kids go when they've encountered their life as a misery. And everybody knows misery loves company. And gang violence is about a lethal absence of hope. So how do you infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign? And how do you help heal the traumatized? And how do you deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way? Things like that. So I said yes. I bought my plane ticket. I figure I'm going to give a keynote. And so a week before I was to fly to Richmond, Virginia, I pull out the original letter inviting me. This happens to me a lot. And I look at the letter. What is this thing I'm flying over to? And to my horror, I finally actually read the letter. And it tells me that I am to be the only speaker from 9 to 5 all damn day. Wow. And so, as the homies would say, I said to myself, oh, hell no, I'm not going to be the only speaker. So I get 2 trainees, Andre, an African-American gang member, and his enemy, Jose, and I sit them down in my office. And they're like in their 9th month, in their 18 months. I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I would like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I had never heard their stories, and Jose gets up first, and he's probably 25 at that point. You know, shot caller from his gang, a big wig, went to prison, tattooed. And you work in different places, the merchandise store, or Homegirl Cafe, or the bakery. So I think at that juncture, he became a very valued member of the substance abuse disorder team, a man solid in his own recovery, and now he was helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction. And so, you know, shot caller, gang member, prisoner, but he also had a long stretch as a homeless man, even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers, and he starts to tell his story, and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. And we got whiplash going from gasp to laugh. I'd never seen that before. But then he continued. He said, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walks me up to an orphanage, and she knocks on the door, and the guy comes to the door, and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day. of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day, my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, the blood would seep through. Second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. Affectionate awe. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if we don't welcome our own wounds, we may well be tempted to despise the wounded. And so this talk is not the place you've come to. It was always going to be the place you go from. And you go from here to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. And you go from here to embrace the marrow of the gospel. And to imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And you go from here to dismantle the barriers that exclude. And my sense of your community already is that you gave up a long time ago caring if anybody might accuse you of wasting your time at the margins. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Thank you very much.
Time for some questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think we have some time if you have any questions, and I will run the microphone to you if you could just. You know, actually, it would be easier if you have some questions just to kind of line up, and we'll have the microphone right here for you.
Let me suggest something else. Just go ahead and raise your hand and holler it out. Yeah,
Well, we have people we're recording, so we want to
comes
hear.
up. That, I'll repeat it.
Okay, thanks.
As a matter of fact, I'll borrow that microphone from you because it. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever feel threatened or afraid?
Did I ever feel threatened or afraid? No, well, not really. I mean, not by gang members. You know, that was always kind of, there was a clarity to that, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, there were all sorts of other forces out there, you know. Like for the first 10 years of our existence, we get bomb threats, death threats, hate mail. None of them from gang members, but all from people who hated gang members. So it was kind of scary, and it was, and really some unwell people who would leave voicemail messages. But then it changed in an instant, you know, where people, you know, they kind of hoisted Homeboy up on its shoulders at some point. You know, actually, when our bakery burned to the ground in October of '99, you know, that it was, all of a sudden you had an editorial in the LA Times that said, you know, Homeboy belongs to Los Angeles, so let's get going. And that's why we're in our 4th location, which is, you know, because people rallied. And they could see that this was really smart on crime, not tough. And that smart was better than tough. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bob, as well. Thanks for your story. I have 2 boys that are, one's diagnosed with schizophrenia, one was, he's an autistic kid, he's got acute anxiety, and their mom and I have been standing at the margins trying to figure out a way to get these kids included. And in your experience, have you had any experience with the mental health of bipolar schizophrenia,
Yeah.
autistic disorder, and
Yeah.
how parents try to find community for these people that are marginalized by our society?
Yeah. So the question is about his sons who are high level of anxiety and mental health struggles, and how do they find inclusion in our society? I hope we make progress there. You know, Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General before, you know, he left office, and he's become a friend, and he's really the real deal. And he says mental health is the defining health issue of our time. And of course he's right, you know. Sometimes we don't know how to name things correctly, you know, because we still cling to this odd thing about goodness and badness. Who's good and who's bad, as if God could ever see that way. It doesn't make any sense to God. And God keeps hoping it'll stop making sense to us. But it's like, you know, people talk about the worst of the worst. We're rounding up the worst of the worst. And I go, I don't know. I've worked with gang members for 40 years. I've never met anybody who I would call the worst of the worst. I've never met an evil person. I've never met a bad person, ever. Not once, not close, not in the ballpark, not in the city where the ballpark is. And I think that's important, because then you name things correctly. And then you can roll up your sleeves if you've named things correctly. Then you say, well, how do we include everybody? I was at a LA Times Festival of Books, and we were on a panel. It was a rabbi, me, and a columnist. And I don't know what we were talking about, but I said, you know, at Homeboy we embrace 2 principles. Everybody's unshakably good, no exceptions. And we belong to each other, no exceptions. And then I said, now do I think if we embrace those 2 things, every complex, vexing social dilemma would disappear? Yes, I do. And the entire auditorium packed just burst into laughter. And I remember I was startled. And when the laughter subsided, I said, yes, I do. And yes, I do, because I think it's the key. It is the thing that enables us to roll up our sleeves, to really help each other and to find our true selves in loving. And once you know that loving is your home, you're never homesick. Let's get busy, because love never fails. And if people think that's naive, which they do, well, it's only because we've never really had confidence in it. But watch what happens if we're confident in the power of love. Because love is inclusive. Inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, compassionate acceptance. So the next question is for Ronald. I don't know if you know that or not, but go ahead.
I'd love for you to speak more about your first year at Homeboy, when you did the first year
Perfect.
experience there, and what it was like, and the challenges, and what was wonderful.
She's asking about,
That was the more important.
she's asking about the first year of Ronald's year at Homeboy.
First year at Homeboys, overall amazing. And at the beginning, it was scary, very scary. As I mentioned, I did 15 years in prison. I got out with nothing, no home. I had a couple family members. I didn't have no car, no job, no nothing. And I still didn't go down there to Homeboys. It took me 3 months to go down there to Homeboys. I wasn't getting in trouble. I was still doing what I was supposed to do, but I was scared. Putting myself in a position where, hey, I'm about to be surrounded by all these people, all these enemies. I didn't want to be a part of that. And that was only because of all the hard work I did to get out of prison. I know what I did to get out of prison. I know what it took. So in my mind, I'm like, why would I put myself in that situation to become a victim or somebody running to me and seeing what I did from my past life or something like that. So I didn't go down there. 3 months, but I ended up getting put over by the police. In Culver City, California. It's a real good neighborhood out there. I was with my baby sister now. I was with my sister, and we ended up getting pulled over in the parking lot for circling parking lot too much. We looking for parking. It's a Sunday afternoon, probably 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we actually got pulled over in this parking lot. I couldn't even imagine. My mind was like, what's going on? Once they found out I was on parole, they handcuffed me and my brother and my sister, took us out the car, had me against the wall. This Culver City, so it's a lot of, this is a nice neighborhood. So in my mind, everybody that's passing me by, I'm feeling like I'm being judged. I'm being judged about things I did in my past. People's not knowing, hey, I just got my degree in prison. People don't know I'm in good standing with my parole office. All they see is this black dude handcuffed against this wall. And everybody's just walking past. Ain't nobody's helping. Ain't nobody's trying to figure out what we done. Why are we being harassed? Nothing. It was a voice in my head going off this whole time, though, saying go down here to Homeboys. Well, prior to this situation, I ended up running to one of my homies. Not somebody that looked like me, not the same color, not the same ethnicity. One of my SA partners that I met in prison. SA slang for Southern Hispanics in jail. He's somebody I met through education, going to classes, self-help groups. He took the courage, had the courage to withstand the politics, and theirs is way worse than ours in prison. So me seeing him in positions, going to school, getting his services, I end up liking him. We end up working on the Men's Advisory Council in prison, where we handle all the issues for the whole population. I was in charge of all the issues that deal with African Americans. That was on the yard, and he was in charge of all the Southern Mexicans. So he gave me a lot of game, gave a lot of insight from a different walk. I implied that what he had, we built a cool relationship. Well, I ended up running into him in Koreatown just out shopping. He looked it real good, healthy, size, got his weight up, face clean. He has a car, and I'm like, bro, what's up? Like, what you got going? What you got cracking? Like, what's up? And he said, I work at Homeboys. This whole time he's telling me, we on the street, middle of the street, in front of this store. He's telling me, hey, yeah, I do this. I got this going on. I got this going on. This whole time in my head, yes, I'm telling him, yeah, all right, I'm going to come down here. Dapping him up, shaking him up, got his number. But in my head, I knew I wasn't coming down here. I knew it. But I was telling him, yeah, bro, I'm going to see you up there. Whoa, whoa. Well, 2 weeks later, I get put over by the police, and his voice is in my head. The whole time I'm handcuffed, and I'm handcuffs again. Go down there to Homeboys. Come down there to Homeboys. Well, that next day, I came down there to Homeboys, and I never left. Like I said, I was scared. Yeah, go ahead, yeah. So when I walked in, I was scared, nervous, didn't know what to do. But when I walked through them doors, I did what a lot of us prison dudes do, and that's observe. I watched. I went to like the back crevice of the office. We have morning meeting every day. One of my favorite things of the day, starting my day, is making here for morning meeting. But this morning meeting, I stood back against the wall and I watched. I just watched everything. I watched how everybody was interacting, how much traffic was going in and out this door. And the thing that made me stay that day, it was two things. Before I got to that back wall, 3 people asked me, have I eaten today? It might seem like a small gesture, but coming where I'm from, I done spent 4 or 5 days without eating. And ain't nobody asked me, have I ate? People that look like me, people that got the same tattoos, that's represent the same hood as me, haven't ate. My sisters and family members, aunties and cousins, wasn't concerned about me eating. But here I am in this building for 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes. And 3 people asked me, was I hungry? And none of them was the same skin color as me. That instantly started breaking my walls down right then and there. Morning meeting start, it kicks off. Everybody's excited. About time we get to like the 4th speaker, 5th announcement, it was like everybody was celebrating everything, whether it was somebody's birthday, whether it was 1 day of sobriety, 100 days of sobriety, whether you got your driver's license. They go down a whole list, let you know what doctors is here, mental health. So I'm paying attention, I'm listening, and it's everybody. Everybody got something different to say. Everybody's accomplishing something different. Everybody's on their own journey. And one thing I noticed, nobody's worrying about your past. Everybody understands that, hey, you are on a journey. Whether your journey's been worse than mine or not, I understand the fact that, hey, compassion, some love, some hope can probably propel you on your journey. And that kept me in that hallway. And then when morning meeting like adjourned, and you're trying to get out of here. Mind you, this is my first time. I don't know where to go. So I just was like stuck in a trance right there, and I get tapped on the shoulder. I get tapped on the shoulder by one of my homegirls. One of my homegirls from my neighborhood that I grew up with. I grew up with her big brother. Me and her big brother is very close. So I know her whole story. I know how much time she did in prison. I know how much domestic violence she'd been through. I know how many times her kids got taken from her. She tapped me on my shoulder. And I was surprised to see her. I didn't know what she was doing here. Come to find out, she's a case manager. And that instantly changed me. It changed my perspective, the way I viewed Homeboys, because I've been heard about Homeboys since I was 12 years old, 13 years old, being in and out of juvenile hall. I never took heed to it. Why? Ignorant, biased, racist. The list goes on. Being in that lobby, seeing my homegirl in the position she was in, after being through everything she'd been through, I just knew anything was possible right then and there. And I stayed. And I'm glad I stayed. Because my life ain't perfect at all. But I do know within myself, I do want to be better every single day. And that's why I come to Homeboys every day. No matter how bad my day is, no matter how bad my weekend is. When I walk through them doors, I'm going to be greeted by smiles. I'm going to be greeted by love. And that changes you, humanizes you in ways that a lot of us, not only myself, but all our trainees have been craving for. And that's the best thing about Homeboys and kept me at Homeboys. And then before that, the best thing I love about Homeboys is the structure within Homeboys, right? It's a family. Once you in here 1, 2, 3, 4 months, it's not a training program. It's not even a healing program. To me, it's a family now. I got case managers. I got navigators. I got trainees, homies and homegirls that want to see me thrive, whether that's my career-wise, whether that's mental health-wise, whether that's job-wise. They want to see me thrive. And now I got a village I could call my own, a village that I could depend on anytime, any day, not even just at Homeboys, but outside of Homeboys. I receive help, services where, like I mentioned, I didn't have housing. Well, they helped me move in my first place. Housing assistance, they have you there. I take therapy now. That's one of my things I look forward to every Monday. I tell my boss now, don't give me no tours on Monday, because I ain't going to be able to do it. I go talk to my therapist at 12 o'clock, 12 to 1 o'clock every Monday. That's one of the greatest things I love about Homeboys, because you couldn't do that in prison. My mom, uncles told me not to talk to counselors, not to talk to teachers, not to talk to these people about what goes on in your life, in your house. But being at Homeboys, where everything is so there, right there. You see homies and homegirls coming out this door. I know what's going on behind them doors. That's a therapist's office. He's coming out this door with a whole new attitude, with a whole new perspective, joyful. I ain't never met so many people, gang members, talk about their therapy session. Hey, man, I'm about to go talk to my therapist. Where you going, bro? I'm about to go to lunch. Man, I got to go to therapy session right now. I'm about to be late. Those are the type of things that make you want to put your best foot forward every day, day in, day out. And those are just some of the things I love about Homeboys, and that's keeping me here, part of the 18-month program. And hopefully, I ain't going to say hopefully, I'm going to speak into existence. I'm going to be a member of Homeboys forever, because I don't want to go nowhere, and not just to be stagnated, but I don't want the love to go nowhere. My family, whether I'm at my new job, whether I'm in a new different career, I know that I'm going to always have that love, that kinship, and everything's possible when you walk through them doors, because when you spread your wings, I think we call them the kinship wings, when you spread your wings, you're going to feel a little love, you're going to feel a lot of hope, a lot of freedom, and that's what we need. That's what I need. And that's why I'm going to stay at Homeboys. And that's just some of the good things about Homeboys that I love.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronald and Greg. Greg is, I'm assuming some people may have brought books hoping that he might sign it. There's a table in the narthex at the back that he will be at for a short time afterwards. Thank you for coming out.